Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of the worst produced show on the internet. This is Pete Bickford. This is the ComicBase Livestream, and we're trying awfully hard to get this one off the ground. I hope it's coming through to you guys okay. We got a couple of new things going on. StreamYard just introduced 4K local recording, if not streaming, and please let me know if this is working okay or if there are any bizarre technical hiccups. Also, if you guys give me a quick up or down, is the sound anywhere near okay, because we did not have a chance to do a sound check, and that's always amusing. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up on the chat here. Excellent. All right, guys, this is probably gonna be a quick show today. Because I'm knee deep in a lot of other things right now, but much of which I hope to share with you next time out, but I'll do what I can. The topic of this one is, honestly, it's catching up on some things we didn't quite get around to last time out, which is primarily importing and some of the ins and outs of getting your data in from other programs into ComicBase. Hopefully I can be of use to people who are trying this one, but I also have a request for people that if you have data that you're trying to move in from other things and you're having any kind of challenge at all with it, please get in touch with me because I want to see your data files. pbickford@human-computing.com, because this is a topic of particular interest to us of late. We're trying to make things easier to come in from all manner of other places. It's obviously in our interest, but obviously I think of yours as well, to take something and make this as smooth as we possibly can. So if you during the course of this whole thing, if there are questions you find that you have and we're not able to resolve by himself, just reach out, please. pbickford@human-computing.com. I'd love to be able to get that going. All right, so a couple of quick notes. First of all, Hurricane Helene, holy cow. Last time we talked, I was about ready to head out to the points east. I was planning to hit Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, see some friends, and so forth along the way. And Friday morning, we looked at the weather, we called an audible on it, and my wife and I said, yeah, let's cancel the dog sitter and let's kind of stay at home. And it turns out that was a really good call. Yeah, because I mean, wow, half the places we wanted to have visited are been washed through and washed out, and it's just an ugly scene out there. Let me see if I've got if I can switch to the other camera here for a second. Oh no, it's just yes, this is part of the area that we would have been driving through on this point. Charleston and everything else like that, practically underwater. Just ugly scene down there. If you guys were caught in the path of that, if you've suffered from it, my thoughts are with you. And if there are things you can do, as far as I can tell, it's hard to know at this point how to characterize the disaster response. On the federal level, it's been strangely quiet. I'm just going to put it that way. I've got enough experience working with local agencies on the whole thing to know that what you see in the national news is not necessarily indicative of the absolutely heroic work that the local agencies are doing. But man, oh man, it's been like there's been almost a news blackout on this whole thing, and that does not mean that there has been terrible destruction. Last I heard, something around 130 people dead. Obviously, if you look at the zones that were hit through this thing, obviously a ton of people have just lost everything. I mean, houses floated out off of their foundations, debris everywhere. Any number of places have got no roads, utterly washed out, and that's one of the things that's making the whole thing very complicated, is that it's hard just to get to these places. So, I mean, when a disaster happens in downtown New York City, it's easy to cover. The news agencies are all there. You can send out your teams. It's all good. If it happens out in the back of nowhere in Appalachia, it's just as heartbreaking. The people's lives are just as real, but if it's hard to make into a news story, or if for whatever reason you feel like, I got other things to worry about right now, I don't think it gets the attention it deserves. That being said, I am seeing a lot of really impressive heroic efforts on the local level, including just people who decide, I'm just going to load up my pickup truck and start driving that way with generators and bottled water and help out. I'm going to say, probably if you're of a mind to do something, reach out to the communities that you're interested in helping and get on to as local a level as possible and see where they need it, things and what you can best do to help, because it's it's hard to get a really good national face on the recovery effort on this one. I'm not sure if there is one, but definitely, if you can help people in the local communities, that's definitely where you'll get the most bang for your your goodwill buck, I guess. But anyway, best of wishes to everyone involved in all that. All right. So on other far less important matters, ComicBase 1592 is out. It's a new patch. If you guys were running some of the builds from the last 16, 18 hours or so, there are a couple more glitches than usual because there's been more code cleanup than usual going on. We're going through a bit of an effort where, in response to also doing basically, we're prepping for some bigger features that are coming in the future, especially with Atomic Avenue. And part of what we're doing here is we're running some refactorings and code shakeups and changes. I was equating it to, you might think you keep a really clean desk or something like that, but when you go and you file through your desk drawer, if you ever are forced to just review every single thing in the big code piles that you've had piling up for 30 years, even though they've been gone through and updated and fixed and preened, constantly, it's different when you're doing that versus when it's time to move and you actually have to dump all your desk drawers out and look at everything in there and say, where did this battery come from? Anyway, big code files in ComicBase or any project that's been around for a long time are a lot of the same kinds of stuff. But we've been doing a lot of big cleanup behind the scenes on these things, which in some other ways, I mean, it's kind of neat. You can actually see the size of the application shrinking somewhat as we cut out things that were useful 15 years ago, but have been kind of factored out of the code in between, or we've obsoleted different things, and we just never cut out we just never cut out the code settings. That part's all cool. It also means occasionally we break something. But if you do experience any kind of weirdnesses with the interim builds on these things, please let me know, because we are revving up towards the big 25.1 release, which we hope to have out. I'm kind of targeting for next week on this one. I'd like to get it done in sync with the full release of the new mobile app, which we finally have a build from the Apple Store that, well, we'll see if they approve it. But we think we might be able to get some action going on that one. If so, that's going to be our big first quarter update, and we think you'll enjoy it because there's actually a lot of really cool stuff we've done in the new version, which we'll be talking about in more detail next time out. But we'll get back to that one. Other things that are going on. What is another very strange thing that we did? You might have noticed from an earlier show that one of the big themes we're doing with ComicBase 2025 and 25.1 is just quality of life improvements. It's just get rid of the things that just are just kind of, they make you just a little crazy, or it just adds a little friction in your life that you don't want, and so forth. So one of the things that in order to move towards that is we're constantly monitoring our own tech support lines and saying, well, what are the things people are calling from? And we have a bucket of the top 5, top 10 issues and so forth, and what are the things that can be done to make that better? And I mean, if it's something like your credit card expired, obviously there's not tons of things, or you forgot your user ID or so forth. I mean, there's limits to stuff like that. But one of the ones that's actually gotten out of nowhere, and I was like, this is one of our top tech support issues now, but it's actually started to climb the charts. Is people who have gotten the renewal notice. It says you have to get the new version because your subscription expired, and they go and they do that, but then they don't follow through by actually downloading and installing the new version. They say, okay, well, you asked me for more money. I gave you more money, so why is it not working? Because you didn't download the new version is the main thing. And I think, honestly, it comes from it comes from other things in your life, like if your cable bill's about to expire, or you haven't paid the power, or just your subscription to ancestry.com is about to run out. Whatever the thing is, usually people especially in the subscription based world of ours, if they're asking you for more money to keep the service running, you're not looking for anything new. You just want to keep the lights on. And so I think that's where people that's where their heads are at. It's like, I paid, but the thing that they don't get, because we have a slightly different model here, is that we're always updating the program of ComicBase itself, and so part of when we get you to upgrade to a new version is we're trying to get you onto the new code so that you can actually do the new thing. And so your serial number isn't just tied to your account. It isn't like Bob Jones bought a copy of ComicBase once upon a time, and as long as he keeps paying us money, we'll keep going. It's no, Bob Jones bought a particular version of ComicBase which had a subscription, and then that subscription will eventually run out, and then we want to roll to another thing. And so it's something that honestly we might need to, if the world keeps going the way it's going, we might need to investigate that as a model. Is that I don't know how do you tie subscriptions and serial numbers together in a way that we do get you to upgrade to the new version, because we actually don't want you running like ComicBase 2015 until the end of time, as long as you paid us money, because that means it's very hard for us to update the underlying guts of ComicBase and build new features out and make sure that everyone's on the same page. So we actually do, when there's a new version out, we actually do need you to upgrade to the new version, and so that is part of what we're doing here. But I do understand that there's a bit of friction with that. Well, anyway, our solution for the moment for this particular problem is that we've actually built in mechanics into the thing where if you're running, say, ComicBase 2024 and your subscription's expired, you've gone and bought another one, which then issued you a copy of ComicBase 2025, which is what you all are running right now. But if you then are still launching the old version of ComicBase 2024 with the expired subscription on it, it'll actually now tell you, hey, you never updated your new thing and you own it, so please download it. Here's the download link. You just click it here and then you'll be good. But then it'll bug you about that every time you try to do something on the expired copy until you download the not expired copy. So I don't know, it's better than what we were doing. Hopefully it's keeps it from becoming a tech support issue for us. But let us know what you think about that. We're trying. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at. Department of Comics says ComicBase is like Windows. They stopped supporting older versions. Yeah, I mean, it's a fair cop. I mean, it's the problem with the software business is, it'd be great if you could build one thing and it would keep running forever, which in a very, very small scale, like if you're building something very small that doesn't rely on anything else in the world, it is possible to do things like that. But the problem is, they call it different things. The incorrect term is bit rot. It isn't, but I mean, it's ComicBase will keep running, but if over the years, if you've got a version of ComicBase from 2005 and you try launching it, good chance that it doesn't run on your current computer. Good chance that it'll it might reference internet protocols that have been obsoleted, web services that have gone down. Things change. Once upon a time everything was FTP over unsecured internet. Now it's not. It's so because the environment's always changing. It's always a real struggle to get old things to work forever, even if you're trying like forever to get things out of date. One of the things I took out of the code behind ComicBase and the comicbase.com website was like 20-year-old UPC lookup code, which worked with the very first web app we ever did for like the iPhone 4. It had a mobile, what these days we'd call a progressive web app, but it was basically like a simple web page where you could put in a UPC number and it would return some information about the comic book that was corresponded to that. And we'd kept this running on the server for like 20 years, at least 18 of which passed when we were doing anything with the code ourselves, because we thought, well, someone might have built something based on that and we don't want to put them out. But there comes a time when it's just so ridiculously obsolete that you just have to say, yeah, I just got to cut this out because we have things like more than one media type now, and we return completely different sorts of data now, and so forth. And so, it's you do need to periodically force people to go to the new thing in order to kind of keep the whole ball of wax going, because it's just, you're not just moving your one copy of ComicBase down the road as you go from version to version. You're moving a whole ecosystem with it, and it's just really hard to keep that rolling for more than a few years, which is why even Apple, I just bought an iPhone 13 Pro, which we're using for testing here. I don't even use it for a phone. It's a very expensive test device. But even that one, it only is going to run a certain number of versions of the Apple operating system and so forth. And I expect it to fall out of support in another year or two. It's part of the cost of just being part of the modern world. But anyway, enough whining about that one. Department of Comics also asks, how's the Florida house? Great. Barely. It's funny because if you looked at the Stormfront, it was barreling, if you just took the angle of it as it's hitting the United States, it was barreling right towards Destin. It just exerted all its energy by the time it got there. So it didn't even knock garbage cans over. It was just I mean, it was actually sunnier looking at the garage camera, remotely in Destin than it was sitting here back here in Tennessee, where we just honestly, where I'm at in Middle Tennessee, we just kind of got rained on for a few days. It was no big deal. But man, Eastern Tennessee and points east of that, woof, man, not a good scene. Anyway, enough about that. All right, other things going on. Oh, let's talk about Windows here, because that is one of the other big news items. Windows 11 24H2. Gotta love these naming conventions. So if you're on Windows right now, the only game in town is Windows 11, which really comes down to like Windows from the last 2-3 years or so. All the other versions are either deprecated or completely unsupported at this point. Windows 10 is the last one that's getting even security updates, but even that isn't. There's no active code behind it, and Windows, it has it scheduled to be mothballed, which is interesting because Windows 11, when it came out, arrived with a bunch of new hardware requirements, which means that a great many of your PCs, unless they're really quite new, can't even run the damn thing. So I suspect Windows 10 will be like the way Windows 7 or Windows XP where it hangs on for about a decade beyond when it should have, because it's so many PCs, it's just impossible to move from 10 to 11. My wife's computer, which she insists is perfectly fine, you don't need to upgrade me. It literally, it lacks what's called the Trusted Platform Module. It's a little chip that they use to store crypto keys on it for doing secure booting and so forth, which is a base hardware requirement of running Windows 11. It doesn't have it. So a computer she's perfectly happy with, perfectly fine for her, because it lacks this one rather esoteric feature, can never have a more modern version of Windows installed on it, which means in probably under a year, I believe 2025 is when the last Windows 10 security updates are meant to go out of style and so forth. And it's going to be it's going to be weird. I think it's going to be one that I would not be surprised at all if you don't see Microsoft punting on that little date quite a bit, because going from 10 to 11 is so hard for people on a hardware basis. But with that said, Windows 11 24 H2 is for the second half of the year, so that's the way you read these things. So second half of 2024. The release is coming out depending on what machine you've got, what it's got under the hood. You may or may not be being fed this by Windows Update right at this very moment. They're taking a little bit of time because it's a big rollout, and there's a lot of new stuff in it. The main thing that's in it is AI everywhere. This is the one with that recall feature that they were touting about quite a bit several months ago, which they required this insanely powerful, was it neural operating processor? It was like 40 teraflops or some crazy amount of, tops, trillion operations per second or something. It was just stupidly powerful gear required to run this thing, also with special processors and so forth. But the idea was the recall feature, which was they're very, very proud. This was their marquee feature for the entire line of Windows, was that it was going to be basically every 5 seconds or so screenshotting your screen, storing everything you're doing, so that you could look back there and say, hey, what was that password I was trying to give myself back? I don't know, it was about a month and a half ago. It was for that one site, and that you might be able to figure it out by reeling your computer back in time and doing this stuff. Obviously, a privacy and security nightmare. and it's funny because I think Microsoft expected a completely different reaction to it than they got from the market. Instead of people saying, well, that'd be wonderful if I could just go back in time to 3 weeks before last Wednesday and see what I was doing on that spreadsheet. More or less, they're thinking, oh my God, anyone could hack my everything if they could see that stuff. So they backed way off on the whole thing. They made it instead, an opt-in feature that was, they say they revisit a bunch of security considerations. Your judgment will vary on that one. But anyway, that one is finally out. It exists in the real world now. If anyone's running it, please let us know what you think. I'm very, very curious to see what it is. I'm going to say right now, I do not have the necessary gear to run that on my own machines, and I don't think I'd turn it on if I did. But that's me. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. If you've got a use case and you're using it and it's brilliant, I want to hear it. I mean, because maybe I've been wrong about other things in the past, strangely enough, but maybe I'm wrong on this one too. But my initial reaction, the reaction of pretty much everyone I ever talked to about this one, Was, oh, hell no. With that said, Microsoft also added AI features to everything from Notepad to Paint. Yes, MS Paint, everyone's go-to graphic program, it now has the ability to create pictures out of text, out of prompts that you give it. You can draw a little stick figure and have it turn it into something much more awesome. Um, this one, I don't know. If someone uses it and they become an absolute believer in it, let me know. But they've definitely embraced AI in a big, big way in 24H2. Along with that, though, I understand there's quite a few other features that are more quality of life improvements. Everything from animating the Wi-Fi icon to changing up a bunch of how system settings work. When you're quickly browsing through settings on your computer, like for things like screen contrast or volume or stuff like that. They've made all these things. Honestly, it sounds that they've gone much more towards almost like an Android phone model of being able to quickly dial in the common things. Just from kind of a swipe, pull down kind of gesture. That is opposed to digging around in the control panels or the settings panels to try to find out where that elusive setting is. Anyway, a bunch of new stuff that, the fine points are actually a little bit interesting. I am actually looking forward to playing around with 24H2 when it comes out. Has not come out for my particular machine, but if you guys are trying it, let me know. And I'm definitely interested in hearing people's impressions of it. Because, they're moving forward one way or another. And AI is obviously, there's no getting rid of it. It's in. I mean, it kind of arrives in these big splashy ways that make a lot of people go ooh, and a lot of other people go huh, stay away. But I think the inexorable part of AI, the part that makes me think that no, this is just the way life goes, is all the little things that just wind up getting automated in very small ways in ways that you say like, no, it's just the way it works. Everyone gets how that goes, and under the hood, and it brings the baseline of automation in our lives way up. And I think that culturally, that's going to be the most interesting thing about AI as it goes forward. So we shall see. Yes, Steve Dazer says, I envision a lot of searches for the how to disable recall feature. Yeah, no doubt on that one. And Defarm Comments says, didn't any Microsoft watch the Terminator movies at all? No. Yeah, we'll see. All right, well, guys, that's about it. Let's see. All right, so let's get on to business at hand. By the way, if you guys have other things you'd like us to talk about or questions that you'd like us to address on things, please, I'm going to get the business out of the way right now. Please post a note, first of all, in the chat to @ComicBase TV. That way it pops up, it kind of highlights it, and so I can see it as it rolls through in the chat on YouTube. If you have any questions before the end of the show, I will certainly try to take them. If not, we'll get back onto import type stuff. But also, don't forget, do hit the like and subscribe for the sort of thing, because this is the sort of thing we do. And if you have any ideas or topics for future shows, please post them in our forums, forums.comicbase.com, or just link to the community site on the website. And we do have a special link on the forums to the ComicBase TV topics and the live stream topics. Interested in hearing what you've got to say about that, and also some other neat things like links to the big ComicBase cover catalog that Andre does and so forth. So check that out. All right, so let's get on to it. So let me switch computers over here for just a second, and there we are. And let's talk about importing. Actually, no, let's be on camera here for just a second. All right, so let's talk. So getting your data into ComicBase. Obviously, your data can come in a lot of different formats. The easiest way is if you've got an old ComicBase database, even if it's from ComicBase 5 or 6 or something truly old. As I've mentioned, we've been doing this for, what is it now, 32 years coming up on this year. I believe it's our 32nd anniversary. Yep, that's it. 1992 is when we launched our first version. And I believe our first customer is still with us. So which awesome. Thank you very much. But anyway, going all the way back to not quite the very, very first versions, because the very, very first versions we were Mac only, and it wasn't until version 4 or 5 that we had a viable Windows product out there. But even those very old databases, if you need to bring them over into current version of ComicBase, and I've actually taken this call a couple times in the last couple of weeks, which is like, my husband passed away, and I'd like to, open up his very, very old, out of date, the stuff and see what we've got. If you just literally launch the new version of ComicBase, say file open, it will either open up directly because it's good to go, or if you have a very, very old version, it'll open up and say, wow, my golly, this version's old. I'm going to need to transfer it into a brand new type of database first, but after that, I can open it, and that all happens automatically. It's pretty darn good. I'm going to say back to versions, I don't know, 10. Yeah, I'm going to say it's pretty rock solid. Below that, I've seen it done. We don't test with it going all the way back to like 5 or 6, but it should work anyway. But and honestly, if you do have any trouble with those sorts of things, certainly if you do happen to have a 25-year-old copy of ComicBase that you're trying to move data in from, and you have any trouble, let us know, because we're always trying to improve our ability to work with old stuff. But it should work pretty much automatically. That's the easy way to go, is if you've got old ComicBase data. And typically, what you'll see if you're the big switchover, I'm going to say, is ComicBase 2020 is when we released a brand new, it's our modern database format. It's a format called, it's a database engine called SQLite. Before then, we were on the Microsoft Jet database engine. It was a .cba file for your database file. Much older, much slower. I mean, it was cool. It's what Microsoft Access was built on, but for its day, it was all right. But we need to move into something much more, much more with it, faster, able to do more things. And so we did a complete recode of the program over the space of almost 4 years. And in ComicBase 2020, we introduced the new modern database format built on the SQLite database engine. Much, again, a lot of great stuff, much faster. Most notoriously, it did no longer have the 2 gigabyte file size limit, which was really causing trouble at the end of our experience with Jet, because especially when you go to download and update, we have to basically load in a copy of all the new stuff, compare it to your stuff, and then mix and match to bring you up to date. Well, the act of doing that would nearly double your database size, which meant that if your database was pushing 1 gig, suddenly your database was pushing almost 2 gigs. And if it ever hit the 2 gig limit, everything stopped cold with the old Jet database engine. So in 2020, so almost coming up on 4 or 5 years now, I was so happy to see the backside of the Jet database engine. I have rarely looked back, and certainly not fondly. But anyway, with any of those things. But yes, if you've older version of ComicBase, absolutely should be just able to bring it forward. If you have it, and if you're in the situation that some of our old users did, where the last time you saw the database was in a backup that was saved to their user's cloud or a floppy disk or something else, like a CD or something like that. Typically, all you got to do to get into modern ComicBase, like I say, is just take the file, copy it down to your local hard drive, install a modern version of ComicBase, say file open, point to that database, and it will load it in and do what's necessary and bring you up to date. That's the easy way to go. So a couple questions come in here. Any update on the ComicBase phone app? Yes, the new Android version is out in the stores right now. That is live. The iPhone version, we are in store submission at this point. So we will let you know as soon as they've approved it. They have not approved it as of yet, because the Apple Store's ways are strange and known to only a few. You throw it over the transom, and then some guy from the backup beyond eventually sends you a bitchy note saying, I did not like this icon, and then you have to make changes to make them happier because of something. And it's always very strange. I'm going to say that's my 90% experience with the Apple Store. The 10% experience with the Apple Store is you throw it over the transom and they say, okay, it's live. And as far as I could tell, the differences between what you were doing and what they were throwing it back on between those two cases are rarely perceptible by outsiders. But anyway, that's where we're at right now, and we're busy wasting time with the Apple Store. So anyway, all right, so that's the Apple Store. On back to importing. All right, so the typical way that you would get data in from something else, on the other hand, would be in the form of a text file. So let me go ahead and switch it over to the other PC over here, and I believe I've got the key fixed over here. Yes, I do, and I'm once again round. So anyway, so when I say a text file, so what I'm talking about is text is the kind of the universal medium of exchange for all things computer these days. Let me go ahead and pull up one just as for instance. Let's go to my desktop and let's have a look at one right here. So, all right, you might have seen things like this before. So what it is it's basically just a regular series of things. In this case, this is a guy's comic collection where it's got the title, the item number, the condition, the quantity in stock, the cover date, notes, writer, artist, etc. Which whatever was interesting to the whole thing. But basically, what they are is they're in a regular format where each line has the same kinds of things on it as you go down. Now, these sorts of things are much easier to see if you actually have them in something like a spreadsheet. And do I have one on here? And if I don't, can I get one really quickly? Let's find out. Of course, I don't have one on here because I just reset this PC a little while ago. Okay, I'm just going to have to talk through this one because I can't be logging in on this one right now, not during a live stream, that's for sure. Okay, so, but if you're coming from something like a live, no, I don't have Word either. No, this bugger. Sorry, poor planning on my part, guys. Sorry. This is what I get for dashing at the last minute. Anyway, if you were on a spreadsheet, you'd see all the same things. The main difference is they'd all be neatly lined up. But the important part that's really going on behind the scenes is all these things really are just this invisible character between here and here is a tab, and so this is what's called a tab delimited file, which means you've got one field here. In this case, this is the title, 3D Heroes. It's got a tab character, just like on your keyboard, and then it's got the next field. In this case, that's the item number field, and then this is a single character here. That's a tab, and then it's got the condition, lather, rinse, repeat for the quantity, stock, etc. Now, there are other formats. One of the ones you'll see very popularly is something called a CSV file for comma-separated values, which, this is something where you'll typically see like, quote, 3D Heroes, quote, comma, quote, 1, quote, comma. And so basically they'll wind up having to put quotes around everything that isn't a number typically, and then they'll use commas for what tells you what fields in what place. I'm going to typically say, even though you see CSV files a lot, try to avoid using them for exchanging information that contains commas naturally, because there's ways of getting around it. The way that Excel and other places do it, like for instance, if this was in CSV format, we'll go ahead and zoom in on this one down here for a minute so we can magnify it. See, if I were really good, I would have had a CSV file ready to go if I was going to talk about, but I'm just not that good. Come on. No, come on. You. Magnifier. Go. All right, great. All right, so now if I cue in the magnifier, I can actually make stuff bigger. All right, so let's look at one of these things. This is, I believe, the artist field. And you'll notice on this one here that the artist field itself, Jeff Johns, comma Grant Morrison, comma Greg Rucka, comma Mark Waid. I guess it must be the writer field because Mark Waid's not an artist that I know of. By the way, but you'll notice that there's just a ton of people who worked on this one. It actually wraps over to the next line over here, all the way down to Art Thibert. But you notice that what they've also got inside this one field, they've got commas. So the way that like Excel and some other ones will do that is they'll kind of adopt this format where they'll put everything that was meant to be considered one thing as, they'll put it in quotes, and then they'll put commas in between that, and then they'll go quote the next thing. Well, and that's, Excel gets away with it because, among other things, they define their own very freaky version of that file format. It kind of works as long as you're the ones who did it and no one else is doing anything, with that format, and you're at least maintaining your own standards of doing it. I'm just going to say, though, it gets very strange for other programs trying to read that, and they need to have all the same quirks you did. Because, for instance, okay, so we used quotes to say, where, all this was all considered one field. The comma means I'm now at the next field. So this was the writer, and this is now, say, the artist, right? Well, what if the field in question has somebody who has quotes in their name? So, like, for instance, Stanley Art Germ, let's do the scare quotes, get them on camera. Stanley Art Germ Lau. Where does that go in this whole weird mix of things? I mean, so if I say, Stanley Art Germ Lau, right? and Guy Major. Well, if I'm just a computer program trying to interpret where the fields are, what the hell do I do with that? And the answer is, if you're Microsoft Excel, you just kind of have your own rules and ignore the out and out standard of the whole thing, and just kind of hope that your quirks of the guy who wrote the exporter are exactly the same as the quirks of the programmer who wrote the importer, and that's all you give a damn about. Anyway, I would suggest, for the most part, just don't get into a situation where you have ambiguous delimiters, which is to say, this is my long case for saying, when you're going to take your data from any other place, especially from a spreadsheet, avoid comma separated values. I know it's the default. That when you say save as, save as text, you'll say save as text parenthesis CSV. Go down to the next one, I beg you, and go for TSV, which is tab separated values, or tab separated, because tabs don't exist naturally in any field, which means that if I've got the data in one place or the other, as soon as I see a tab, I know I'm in the next place. I see two tabs, I'm in the place after that, and so forth. And there's none of this kind of parsing and sub-parsing of different things. Also, mercifully, if you do tab separated, they tend not to do what Excel does a lot of, which is inserting lots of extra characters where they don't belong when you do an export. So I guess that'd be my next tip is, if you've got this whole thing loaded up in Excel, and again, just imagine I actually had the vision to have Excel installed on this spreadsheet, but and I'd be looking at nice columns of stuff, right? If I were to sit there and say file, save a copy, so go down to file in Excel, save it, save a copy as, and I say tab separate, and I then went and I opened up that file in Notepad and saw what it had exported, I would have seen that it would have added a whole bunch of extra stuff. It would put quotes around different things. It would have, basically, it would have all the quirks that they do in their comma separated stuff. They're not just giving me the values straight. It actually gets a little strange. Now, ComicBase knows to take that stuff out for the most part, but just like I say, because in the world of comic data, it's not, certainly having commas in the middle of your list of artists is a normal thing. Having quotes in the list of artists is a normal thing. I'm going to say, add as few extra weird things that we have to then try to psychically take out as possible. And the easiest way to do that, if you've got something in Excel, is literally go take your spreadsheet, get rid of all the columns that aren't applicable to you, and then literally just highlight all, say Control C, copy, go over to a text file like this one here, and then just say paste. If you do literally copy and paste, it does no extra stuff to the fields, and you'll get the cleanest possible text file to start with. That is, that's my big Excel tip on as far as that goes. Another thing I would say with Excel is watch out. Do always test your files. Sanity check what you think you're exporting by opening them up in something like Notepad first to see what they really gave you, because it's way too easy in Excel to have formulas in there. It's you might have overflow characters where it'll say like dash 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 dash. I'm sorry, pound 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 pound. Because a field was truncated, or it was treating a barcode field as if it was a number or something like that. You might, for instance, in barcode fields, if the field type wasn't set properly in Excel, if that's what you're coming from, it might try to treat a barcode. So a barcode, when you think about it, it's just a 13 or 18 character number, right? That if your field was not defined as text in your spreadsheet, when it goes to export that, it's going to write it in scientific notation. So instead of a like 59606 1234512 for Captain America number 12 or something, right? It's going to say E plus 13 and then a couple digits. So yeah, don't do that. Really, the best thing to do is when you're getting out of something Excel is just literally go hit Control A, which is select all, Control C, which is copy, open up a text file, and just Control V, splot, paste, and then you'll wind up with something that looks like this. So this is how you get your text file to start with. I'll talk about a couple other things about transferring data or transforming data before that, but let's run through what ComicBase does with these files. Is if I were just go and try to import one. All right, so I've got a database over here. This is just my standard ComicBase database that I've been working with. Just for the sake of demo here, I'm going to make a brand new database just so we can see what the effective importing stuff is. And let's go ahead and I'll call it my collection. All right. And what's doing right now is it's basically unwrapping a brand new version database. Let's go ahead and make this one a different color so that you've got a nice way of telling which database I'm in right now. Let's make this purple. Sure, there you go. All right, so this is our test import database now. I'm calling it my collection, and because it's brand new database, it's got nothing in it. So if I go and I click on all titles, there, I will see everything in a second. Okay, but if I say series in stock, there's absolutely nothing at all because there's no quantities on anything right now, right? This is a blank database essentially. It's got all the out of the box listings of everything, but all the quantities are zero. The conditions are all near mint. All right, so now let's go up to our file, that text file we were just looking at here, and let's say we want to import it. So let's go ahead and find it. It's on the desktop. Which, by the way, if you're going to do, this is just a good working tip. If you're the sort of person who keeps your desktop fairly clean, which I highly recommend just for your own sanity, that gives you a nice, just like a real desktop in your real world. If I'm working on something, it's on my desk typically, right? Well, if I want to work on a file that I'm working with, I could bury it 17 folders down in some project where, or if it's just something like, hey, I want to drop this file that I want to import, and I want to have it convenient. Having it on your desktop is great, and so that is whenever I'm downloading something I want to work with, whenever it's a graphic file I want to work with. Desktop is a wonderful place to make that go. The key to making that work, though, is, nice thing is, if I want to get to it, I just click desktop, boom, there it is. But it comes with a duty, just like in real life with your real desktop, of clean the damn desktop off when you're done. So as soon as you're no longer working with this file, put it away somewhere, throw it away, whatever you would do in real life with the whole thing, but keep your working space free. But if you do that, then you get the advantage of having a really nice, convenient place to immediately go to find your stuff. And so whenever I'm telling people, hey, download the file, well, save it to your desktop is typically the advice I would give people. I've kind of a little bit stopped doing that unless I already know that you're somewhat organized. Because if I say save, well, they say, well, where should I save it? And if I say something like, well, save it to your documents folder, then we have to guess, well, where's my documents folder located? And your documents folder tends to be just as polluted with things as anything else after a while. If I say make a folder, then it's like 16 levels deep in their folder, and I have to straighten that. Desktop's a wonderful place to put it as long as you keep your desktop somewhat clean. But in this case, I did. So let's go ahead and open up that exported comics over here. All right, and what we're going to see when you open up a file is it's going to go ahead and we would see a list of all the available fields that might be part of what you're importing, and there are a lot of them. If I make this window bigger, you can see that there's something like 60 or 70 fields that could conceivably be part of what you import. Your job when you open up one of these files is to say, okay, of all things that could be part of the file, which ones are part of the file and what order are they in? Now, in this case, something really cool happened, and it happened automatically. Is it looked at the first line in the file. Let's go ahead and go back to that file so you can see what I'm talking about. So here's export comic books. Look at that first line. See, this would have been like the headers from my Excel file, but what it did is it matched the titles. As long as the name you've got here exactly matches something from this list here, it'll automatically arrange them in the import list, and it'll put them in the right order. It'll do this all automagically, which is super, super, super handy, especially if you're doing importing more than like once or twice. So if you've got, let's say I'm bringing in an Excel spreadsheet, take a moment, if you've got a lot of work to do, and say, make sure that your title, don't call it title name or name of the comic series or things like that. Call it title. If it's the item number field, call it item space number. Same thing goes for condition, quantity in stock, etc. Make them exactly match the fields that you've got listed in this list over here. And because if you do that, then when it goes to import it, because usually you go to import something, you realize, I got to change something up. Lather, rinse, and repeat, and you get sick of it. Because one of the things you have to do all the time is you have to keep on choosing which fields are in which order of the file, unless if that header record exactly matches things, then the matching comes automatically, and it's kind of wonderful. So in this particular field, let's look at it. We start out, we get a title number, and it gives you the next line down, which you see in this case was 3D's Heroes. The item number, which was 1, condition was near mint, quantity in stock was 1, cover date was 9/1/86. There's my notes, the writer, the art. Now, it has an inker and a colorist field, but they're blank because, and let's go ahead and look at the original record for this one now. Let's go back to Notepad. And here's the relevant line on this one. We'll see that, yeah, so, you know, the colorist was Steve Houston after, yeah, I'm sorry, the artist, it was, the writer was Cliff McGillivray, the artist was Steve Houston, and after that, we don't know who the writer artists were, and you can see, you know, every time I do that and you see it clicks over there, that's actually a tab character. You see that they have basically blanks there, and that's the end of the line. And so that looks pretty legit. So I'm looking at the stuff, and it's, you know, the field order exactly matches my preview of the first record. And so, yeah, I'd say that's pretty good. Now, what else could be in this field and so forth? Or what would I do if I had different stuff in my original file that, you know, I either wanted to, you know, add that wasn't there or whatever else? That's where these other fields come in. Like, let's say I had other records in there where I want to say, like, I want to track, like, where did I buy this thing? What I might want to do in that case is use one of my custom fields if I have the Pro or the Archive editions of ComicBase. And I would just define my custom field as where bought, and then I'd move him over, and I'd say that's the field that comes right after that, and I'd match it up with my file. The main part, though, is you've got to make sure that this order that you've got of your fields to import exactly matches your actual data. So, for instance, if cover date was moved down a line, you know, so I'm trying to import cover date in and put in a value like in 3D glasses not included, that's obviously not going to work because that's not a date. So, I mean, it's very important before you get going to kind of check, you know, just looking left or right, do the values that you're looking at here make sense? Because if they do, then you're in good shape. If they don't, you don't. I'm going to say, let's get rid of the custom field here because I'm not actually doing it. Another thing you might want to do is let's talk a little bit about this add blank item. Sometimes in the thing you're importing, you've got stuff in there that was, yeah, it was in the old data, but I don't actually care about it. It's, you know, I don't know. It's, you know, maybe I don't care about what store I bought it from or something like that. You know, maybe it's in my data, but I don't really care, you know, about transferring it, or maybe I made a notation as to what, you know, when I sold it or something like that. But, you know, I could put that in ComicBase. I could stuff it in the custom field, but let's say I just don't want it. It's junk in my spreadsheet. Now I could either get rid of it from my spreadsheet and then move the data into text again, or if I want to, I can also add a blank item and say that, oh yeah, in between the inker and the colorist, there was some junk that I don't want to see anymore, in which case you'd see that there's a blank item, and you'd see that I'm skipping over something there. It's just not going to import it. It's all it means. And all that tells is when it go to import, just forget about that field. Just don't worry about it. All right, so let's go ahead and let's check one or two other things on this one. All right, you'll see down here at the bottom, it automatically determined that the item separator was tab. It got that one right just, you know, by looking at the file and kind of guessing the start, but it did parse it properly. If it had been a comma, then I would have put comma there, and then you would see that it would interpret this entire thing entirely differently. But so I'm not going to do that right now because you'd see that it would kind of scramble the look of the fields because comma is not what separates them. Anyway, but that's about all you got to do as far as importing. Now, note that I'm importing into comic books right now. If I were importing books, that would have to be a separate file. If I were importing magazines, you know, newspapers, etc. So you got to tell what you're importing because it doesn't know. There's no, there's no universal media type that it will automatically, you know, load 15 things at once. You know, like your books or magazines and comics. There's no the only file format that works like that is an actual ComicBase database. But for text files, it's assuming that everything is one media type or another. So make sure you separate those into different things if you're importing different collectibles. For most of you, it's really going to be all about the comic books, so that's why it's defaulting to comic books. But anyway, when you're all ready to go, just say import, and we'll let this thing go. Now, it's importing, I think, a couple thousand lines here. You'll notice it does it really, really fast. Excuse me. In that time, in fact, it went by so fast, you didn't get to see a lot of what it was doing. So it basically, if it saw a title that it didn't recognize, it created a new title. Otherwise, it would match the titles up automatically. It standardizes creator names. It does all the normal things to do. It cleans up your conditions and so forth. It does what it can to make it so that whatever you're importing will fit nicely into ComicBase. And you'll see the second it's done, hey, suddenly I've got some data in here now. Like, for instance, part of the import file was 21 number 1A, and that got imported, and you'll see that one just went purple. You see it right there because it now has a quantity of 1 in it. So it's going to match your quantities, it's going to, mapping conditions and so forth, and it'll just bulk load it all at once. Now, the message it gave me at the end is it says, hey, I saw some titles in there that I didn't recognize. So I loaded them in, but you might want to look through them and look for unknown publishers, because that's going to be the giveaway that these are titles that I didn't recognize. And so once you're done, and you can look through here, and now if I go and I want to look at titles, and I look at series and stock, you'll notice that now I've got a bunch of stuff. Like, I don't know, Aberrant. Yeah, this is clearly a title that, we knew about in ComicBase and so forth. But if I go through here, let me see if I can find any of them that are definitely not. Yeah, these are all fine, but there's probably going to be something along here that I could point to quickly, because it said there was at least one that was a title that it did not immediately recognize. And of course, it's not popping up just by me thinking about it. So, but the giveaway on that one is it says that I'm going to put them in as an unknown publisher. So if I say find publisher and I put in unknown, there you go, or actually unknown publisher, there you go. And here are all the comics that I just imported that it didn't know what they were. So the all-new official handbook for the Marvel Universe. So you guys might remember this, what the deal is with this one. Say, wait a minute, that's a fairly popular title though, right? And it is. The difference is it's not considered a comic book anymore. In ComicBase, that one's considered a magazine because it does not contain comic stories. So when we imported it and said it was a comic book, we actually, and let's go ahead and go to this title right now. When we said that it's a comic book, it says, yeah, I don't see a comic book called that. And the real answer to that one is because if we look over here under magazines, and let me go ahead and put in all new, was it? Oh, sorry, I'm finding publishers right now. Let me find series. That would be useful. Okay, all new handbook. What am I doing? Am I not typing right? Probably. No, it's not all new handbook. Huh, okay, interesting. Oh, all new official. Duh. Not all new. This is pathetic. All new official. There you go, of the Marvel Universe. Okay, so let's have a look in here, because this is something that actually is likely to come up if you're coming in from other programs. Because ComicBase cares, because ComicBase can do, books, magazines, newspapers, and because it cares about the definition of each one, it's possible if you're using another program that only could, lump everything as one big thing, that, we've got the date of import, but we don't call it the same sort of thing. So for instance, these ones, because they don't contain comic stories, are not considered comic books. You'll notice in ComicBase, these are the ones that I just imported. You see that there's now an entry for all new official handbook of the Marvel Universe A to Z and the A to Z update. But there's also, if I tab down here, an existing magazine, which nicely enough has a picture associated with it, so you kind of know which one's the official one. But that one is a magazine. And the one up there that I just imported, same title, but it's a comic book. All right, so what do you do with this kind of stuff? And the answer is what you really want to do is go ahead and switch it over so it's the right type of thing. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the edit menu. I'm going to say change series media type. And I'm going to say, hey, yeah, this thing I just imported, calling it a comic book, it's really a magazine. And it's going to say, hey, do you want to change it? And it's going to transfer the data. And you say, yeah, that sounds lovely. Do that. And it says, yeah, there already is a magazine. You want me to just stick it into that series? And you say, perfect. And so now it's going to take these 3 issues, 4, 6, and 10 of the all-new official handbook of the Marvel Universe. It's going to blast them all over to there, and boom, there they all are. And now I'm looking at their entries over in the magazine section where it belongs. And anyway, so when I'm done with my importing, go through the ones that it said where there's an unknown publisher. See if you can figure out what the deal is with those, because probably one of 2 things is going to one of 3 things is going to have happened. One is It'll either be something where you've just kind of misclassified, or you're classifying the data differently than we would. So in other words, you put a magazine or a book, let's say a portfolio, you put in as a comic book, we know it's really a book. And so you'll see that there's, an unknown entry, unknown publisher entry for the comic book you said it was, but there's an existing entry in ComicBase by the exact same name as a different type of collectible, like a book or a magazine or something. In which case, the easiest thing to do, really the best thing to do, is change what you imported to be the right kind of collectible, because that way you'll get art updates, you'll get picture update, you'll get cover price, not cover price, but market value updates and so forth, and everything will just get handled very nicely. If you leave your data where it was as an unknown item that we just don't know, we'll just leave it alone. We're not going to do anything wrong with it. We won't get rid of it or anything. It'll just kind of be hanging out there. You'll have all the data that you had imported, but you won't have anything new that we can bring to the party. In other words, we won't have been able to fill in any missing information that you hadn't filled in already. We won't be able to give you new pricing and so forth. So, I mean, if what you're importing really is a comic book and it really is something that's already in ComicBase, it's worth it for you to get that treated the same way that we already treat that title. So I'd say, first of all, do a look and see if does the same title exist under a different collectible type. If so, that's your story. Just go into the edit menu, change the series media type, move it into the appropriate collectible. It'll take care of the issue and move on to the next one. You're good to go. Another thing that might happen is you might have it under a title and it's just named wrong, or at least named differently than we did. So, for instance, you might have called it Captain America, Captain America 1969 or 19. When did it come out? 67, as opposed to Captain America Volume 1. If so, then it's worth it for you to go to all those issues that were in the wrong place, highlight them in your collection. And if you know that they really belong in a different title, that we'd call them something else, go under the, I believe it's the edit menu. Yes, edit menu, and say transfer items to a different series. So highlight them first, and then find the series that they should have gone under, and then move them over that way. And that way, they just get filed in the right place. It gets rid of the bogus title if that's what that was, and it just kind of keeps the whole thing clean. And once again, you get the benefits of having new price updates and things like that. It makes your life a bit simpler. And then finally, the other possibility that could happen is that it could be that you've just got things that we don't have. It might be because you're tracking things that aren't properly comic books. Like, for instance, one of the import issues we helped someone with recently was they have a large toy collection, and so they just created a comic type called toy, and they were tracking their comics as if they were toys. So obviously those aren't going to be in ComicBase because we're tracking comic books, but they were fine for the guys. Like, yeah, I got a place to put them, and so I'm just going to put them as toys, and we'll leave them be. If that's the case, then that's fine. You're good where you're at. You don't need to do anything special. But let's say you had something that was just like a really special comic book that we've never seen before. Maybe it was one that was self-published. Maybe it was something that's just obscure. Maybe it's a foreign title. But if you've got a title that legitimately we don't know about, we've never seen it, you've looked around the database, you don't see another match for it, please, I would strongly encourage you, should that happen, highlight the issue or issues that are at stake. Just go ahead and highlight by clicking at the far left row over here, right click on it, and say submit new or corrected data. Because when you do that, what it does is it sends your data to our editors, and then we get the benefit of your experience on that one. We'll get, it allows us to look at the whole thing and say we'll tell you either, yeah, it's actually a different title, it's whatever else, or we'll go ahead and we'll add it to the master ComicBase database, at which point then the ComicBase community and our editors can, again, add to it. You'll get the benefit of pricing because, it becomes a marketable item that can be bought and sold on Atomic Avenue and so forth, which then drives market pricing as it goes forward. And again, it makes everyone just a little bit wealthier, because, you're telling us things that we didn't know about, and everyone can gain from your experience, and that's kind of a cool thing. If you do it a lot, you actually might even work your way onto the leaderboard of people who submit stuff, which I was just looking at the other day, and I think the minimum to get on the board is like 267 points to get in the top 200. But we have people who are just absolutely outstanding. Put in hundreds of thousands of new items and added information, and if you're watching this right now, thank you so much, because it's just a huge gift to the whole community when you do that sort of thing. But yeah, when you submit things like that, please do that. All right. So with that said, want to talk about some other possible cases. So let's say you're coming in from another program, just something we haven't mentioned now. It could be your own program. It could be some hobbyist program, whatever the thing is. The real trick with all of that comes down to is, can you get it into a text file? If you can get it into a text file, then it can be imported as long as it's got at least 4 things. The 4 things you need to have in order for it to be importable is we need to have a title, an issue number, a quantity, and a condition. So those are the big 4 fields. If you don't have those, we can't use your data. I mean, we won't know what your data is, and so we won't be able to do anything with it. But let's go ahead and let's just go and look at those fields again. I'm going to pull up my thing right here. But let's strip this down to the bare minimums that we got to do in order to work with it. Okay, so all right, title. That's the series, that you're bringing in. We got to have it, otherwise we don't know what the heck the stuff belongs to. Same reason, item number, which item number. Why do we need condition, right? Well, because you're going to have a different line in your file for every condition that's out there. So we need, if you don't have condition, I believe it will prompt you and say, hey, please add condition. If not, we're going to assume everything is near mint, which might or may not be what you want. But please specify condition because it's super important. And quantity in stock, I believe if you don't say import it, it'll say, well, we need quantity in stock because if not, we have to assume everything is a quantity of 1, which might or might not be true. But this is the big 4, is if we've got these 4, we can classify what you're bringing in. We'll create the titles if we need to. Like I say, we'll put them in as unknown publishers so they're easy to find. And you can fill in the publishers later on if you want. But those are the 4 that are absolutely key. Without those 4, we can't do anything. That being said, don't put in stuff that we don't need unless it's important for, to you that you want to track it. So for instance, some of the things we don't need is we don't need, for titles that we've ever heard of, we don't need publisher. We don't need cover date generally. We don't need the cover price generally. We don't need, your old, if you'd been putting in the old Overstreet price or things like that, we've probably got a much more modern and accurate price already in the database. I mean, so it's probably not worth it to put in stuff that we're already going to have unless you just like your data better than our data, in which case, more power to you, go for it. But I mean, don't knock yourself out trying to import a bunch of stuff that's already in the database. And if you look through the database, you look at that list of fields, you'll see the kinds of things that we've already got in there. So don't make yourself crazy trying to import stuff that doesn't matter. If you do have stuff that is unique to you, though, that is important, do try to find a place to put it, like a custom field. If you have anything but the Express edition of ComicBase, or the free edition, I guess, but the Pro and the Archive editions have a number of custom fields that you can define to be anything you want. They come in 3 different flavors. They come in text fields, which is just any kind of typing you could do. You can hold that. Comes with checkbox fields, which are, for something is true or it's not true. I've got it, I want it, I've sold it, it's for sale. Whatever the thing is that you're interested in, I will get it signed at the next convention. It's a yes or no question. For things like that, use a custom checkbox. And for dates, so for instance, when did I buy it? When did I sell it? Whatever those things are. But you can define the custom fields in ComicBase to be whatever you want. So if you do have a lot of data that you're trying to bring in that you don't see built-in fields in ComicBase for, do take a moment and go up to the setup menu, go down to custom fields. And by the way, the custom fields can be different for each of your collectible types. So I could have different custom fields for magazines than I do for comics. But anyway, go ahead and say, hey, yeah, for box, for custom field number 1, I want to make that my box, box number or something. Custom field maybe number 2. Let's say custom check number 1 was autographed. Whatever those things were. And as soon as I go ahead and say what I want to use these fields for, and I go ahead and I close this up, you'll notice that when I go and I say, let's go in, and I'm going to say I want to import something now. Let's go ahead and choose my desktop and choose my text file again. You'll now see in my list of fields that I could put in, where it used to just say custom field 1, 2, 3, 4, stuff like that. I guess it hasn't changed. Did I not hit save? But anyway, no, it'll do it. So like custom field, no, it looks like I have. Oh no, sorry, that's magazines. That's why. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so now if I go over to comic books, you'll see now there's a new field called autographed, and there's another field called box number, and I can use these to match up to what I'm importing and put those where they want to go. Worth doing. All right, last major tips I want to give on this one before we get out of here is um, do take some time and scrub your data as much as you can before doing your import. So, for instance, if you've been using things like CGC style numbering for just regular books, like it's I just I fell in love with the idea of a 10.0 scale, and so instead of saying VF, I'm going to say 8.5. Well, ComicBase, if you look at its grading, it uses VF or very fine. It doesn't say 8.5 unless you're saying CGC 8.5, in which case we actually expect that thing to be in a slab. So if you've been using those kind of conditions or something else like that, or you've been adding custom ways of referring to different data, it's worth going through your spreadsheet, doing a little find and replace action. You maybe even set up with a formula, but bring your stuff into the kind of parlance that ComicBase uses as much as possible. I mean, so don't say Nurmund, when you mean near mint or NM, I mean, if you did mean Nurmund, just do a find and replace and change those all to NMs before you import, because ComicBase otherwise will look at and they'll say, oh, you're importing a grade called Nurmund. We don't know what Nurmund is, so I guess that's a new grade, and so we'll add it in and we'll give it a default value, and then you'll have to go and change all those grades later. It's more work. You don't want to go through the work. So do a little cleanup ahead of time. Get your stuff to to be as much in the kind of same realm in terms of use the ComicBase uses as possible. There is actually a couple other programs that are kind of floating around the market there that people often use, and we do some kind of automatic cleanup on certain things like that. We are interested in actually making our game stronger for automatically detecting some of these quirks of other programs. So if you are coming in from another program and you have data you're trying to bring in, please reach out to us. We'd love to look at your data you're doing and see what we can do to also automate some of the cleanups so that it's less for you to remember, and it just makes the whole path easier. But because there's a bunch of programs and they're all doing weird, quirky things, we can never guess all the things that people might be doing, and we don't want to guess wrong and scramble your data. That's for darn sure. We want to bring it in verbatim if we do nothing else. But to the extent that we can make your life easier, reach out. Once again, I'll put my name up on there, pbeckford@human-computing.com. And we'll give you some tips on how to bring your stuff in as easily as possible. But let's see what we can do to help you out on that. All right, I think blank fields. A last tip I had is, if you're moving in from a new thing, might be worth it before you get going. If you discover that your data is anything but like if you've been keeping your data in just a beautifully organized spreadsheet this entire time, you are incredibly locked down as far as how you reporting it. You never vary your formats. Everything's good, and you have high confidence. Then by all means, just go ahead and just say, save as a text file, import it in. You're good to go. I mean, that could be great. Other people have been much more loosey-goosey. I mean, they tend not to be quite as locked down their formats. They have copied and pasted different things in different columns. They put some dates in the writer column when they didn't mean to, and so forth. If you suspect you might need to do this more than once in terms of to get it right, the import right, one good tip you could do is make a copy of the file, the blank file that you started with before you import, especially if you're importing multiple versions of the data in or something like that. Or I've got data from stored in 5 different places that I want to incorporate in a single collection and so forth. It's a good idea in ComicBase is just make a copy of the base database before you get going, because then if you import and you realize later on that I had some fields in the wrong order, I had stuff like that, it's easy to go back if you've made a copy beforehand, because ComicBase is always going to add stuff to it, and it'll throw it out if it's completely invalid. I mean, if we can tell that you're trying to put a number in a date field or something like that, we'll just say, whoa, this data is just wrong, and we'll throw the whole thing out. It'll back it out all at once. But if your data is plausible but still wrong, like let's say you reversed the writer and the artist field, right? There's nothing about that that's illegal, right? It's just wrong. if you do feel like, I might need to go back, make a copy of your file before you do the import, because then you can just say, I screwed that one up. Let me go ahead, chuck that one out, and I'll go back to my copy, and then we'll try it again. And it makes things easier for you. And I talked earlier about, like, if you all suspect that you're going to be doing this more than once, go ahead and take a minute or two, get that first line, which has all the names of the fields you're importing. Go ahead and make sure that those are on there, because it'll save you a bunch of time with the matching, and that winds up being a pretty good tip. All right, so let's see here. Yeah, and yes, Pete said it was going to be short. Yeah, what happened to short? Yeah, I know. I started talking about importing, and I can't stop. All right, guys, I think let me do a quick check of things. I think we've already done the announcements on the whole thing. Okay, let's see. Okay, we talked about the phone app, got that. And Steve says, oh, yes, and Steve had the exact same tip I just did about them. Make a copy before you get going. Definitely a useful thing. And Greg asks, when transferring those issues from the comic to the magazine, the issues will be duplicated under the magazine title. It's going to make a new entry for them. So, for instance, let's say I have you saw that it had issue number 4 in near mint already as a magazine title, and I entered the comic one in. It moved the transferred one, got its own line. So, in a way, it did have a second issue number 4 in near mint with a quantity 0 sitting right next to it. It's not hurting anything. You can clear those out. If that's of interest to people, one of the things I know we had in the past in other situations was a utility which automatically removes duplicate near mint lines in your file. So if for whatever, in ComicBase, you can have, like I say, I have 3 different copies of the same comic book. Like I say, I've got a Black Panther number 1, I've got one in VF, I've got one in near mint, I've got one in VG, or for that matter, I might have 2 that are both, in VF, but maybe they're in VF because they have different defects. Maybe I just want to track them separately because I want to track things like where I bought them or when I bought them. So, all those different lines, you can have as many lines for an issue, in the files you want. They're all treated individually. That part's great, but it can be a little distracting if you're looking down lists. One thing we had done in the past, and I believe when we do this when you import, is we'll automatically look for lines that you imported something and there was a quantity 0 line in the same condition and as what you imported. So let's say I imported a Black Panther in near mint, but there was a quantity 0 Black Panther in near mint in the stock database. I'm going to get rid of the quantity 0 line. I don't believe we do that kind of cleanup automatically when you transfer issues to get rid of duplicate lines. Might be something we might want to consider. Let me know what you think, if that's something that would be of interest to people, because it's a cleanup operation. It's easy enough for us to do. There was a reason we didn't do it, and I'm trying to remember what it was. My guess is someone had a use case that seemed plausible to us as to why we shouldn't. But I'm definitely open to having someone make the case to do the cleanup automatically. I'd love to do that. All right, I think that does it for this. Okay, well, guys, that's going to do it for me. I will see you on the next one, and we'll probably be talking about the 25.1 update. Thank you so much for joining us. I always enjoy doing these things. It'll be a live stream number 186 next time. I cannot believe we've done so many of these. All right, guys, thank you so much. Tell your friends, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.